I've been podcasting since 2006. In that time, I've tried countless hosting platforms, but in August 2022, we switched to Transistor to power all of our shows here at True Story FM, and it's been a game changer.
I love the Transistor allows unlimited podcasts and storage without extra charges. We can publish so much content, and we do. If you want to start up a podcast, do yourself a favor and host your show on Transistor.
With their one-click publishing, you can get your new show onto all the major podcast directories effortlessly.
And their website builder lets you quickly build custom sites for each show.
The detailed analytics are invaluable too. You can access all kinds of listener data anytime.
Oh, and the versatile players allow you to embed episodes anywhere to reach new listeners. Plus, the team behind Transistor is super responsive and keeps making the platform even better.
After using countless hosting services over 15 plus years, Transistor has been, hands down, the best podcast partner for us.
If you want a hosting platform to take all the worry out of getting your podcast out into the world, go to thenextreel.com/transistor and check it out.
Support our show and support your own show by going to thenextreel.com/transistor. Start growing your podcast today. Andy, according to my friend Internet, this is what Letterboxd is. Letterboxd is a global social network for grassroots film discussion and discovery. Use it as a diary to record and share your opinion about films as you watch them, or just keep track of films you've seen in the past. Showcase your favorites on your profile page.
That is a lot.
You bet it is. That's why I want you to tell our fair listeners just one thing you do with Letterboxd that has changed the way you watch movies. Let them have it.
Okay, are you ready for this?
So ready.
I love lists. As of today, I have 246 lists in my account. I use them to track the movies I watch, organize them in all sorts of different ways. I track them by hand. I clone lists from other people. I use them to plan what I'm going to be watching, all sorts of things. I love creating lists. It's a fantastic tool.
Sexiest animated characters. Andy, what is this?
We love Letterboxd, and if you're a movie lover, we are sure you will too. And when you upgrade from the free account, you will remove ads and support the great Kiwi team building this amazing service.
Just use the discount code NEXTREEL or visit thenextreel.com/letterboxd to get 20% off your pro or patron membership. And it works for renewals as well.
In the early year of a decade not too long before our own, the human race suddenly encountered a deadly threat to its very existence, and this enemy surfaced, as such enemies often do, in the seemingly most innocent and unlikely of places. Welcome to Sitting in the Dark. It's time for a British invasion! Yeah! I'm Kyle. I will be sitting in the driver's seat today. Joining me as I go around the circle here is Tommy.
Hey, pleasure to be here, bruv.
We go throw it over to the corner there to Pete.
Oh, hello, madam. Yeah, I don't have anything else after bruv was taken.
Yeah. And don't feel like you need to do any kind of accent. Kynan.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here.
There you go. All right. So we have gathered together because I have assembled 3 movies with a similar theme in that they all have aliens in them, and they all are set in a expanded United Kingdom. So not specifically England, because I know the difference between England and Scotland and Ireland. But like most Americans, we don't learn their other countries until about the 5th grade. So my geography is still a little weak. But I guess overall, so what do you guys think sort of broadly of this before we start getting into individual ones? How did the movies, the 3, sort of play together for you?
Real quick, I can just go first and say that I had only seen 1 of the 3, and I'd only heard of 2 of the 3. So I was very excited to dive into this. Thank you again for putting these on the list. Attack the Block was always one that I knew was going to be, it just got away from me. Like, I knew it was supposed to be great, and then I think I waited so long, I was like, it's probably just not that good anymore. Everyone's bitten off of it. Grabbers, I still am not sure exist. Because I've never, it's like got the perfect title, so many things I want to talk about that. Yeah. And then The World's End was the only one as the end of the Coronetta?
Yeah, Cornetto. Yeah.
Cornetto trilogy.
Well, the 3 flavors of Cornetto, that's like, it's the...
That's the only one that I had seen leading up to this. So this was a lot of fun.
I had not seen Grabbers, and I'm with Tom. I'm still not sure what I saw. It's amazing in so many really strange ways. I had seen Attack the Block, although I was a recent convert to it. I saw it just years after it was released. Thrilled by it and the creature. Can't wait to talk about the gorilla wolf thing. And World's End is my love language. I mean, it is everything that I feel all the time about growing old and friendships and also aliens. So, yeah, I mean, I had a great time with these movies just in a piece. And I should say, I watched them all last night.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
You were on your own golden mile of sorts.
Yeah, it's true.
There's a certain level of baseline of lucidity that may start to fail as I turn into a pumpkin over the next hour.
Yeah, these were really delightful movies. I liked all three of them. I had seen The World's End. Watching that again within this context, knowing it's a British invasion movie, was interesting because the movie pulls the rug out from under you around 37 minutes in the first time you see it. Yeah. So watching it again and knowing, oh, this is all set up for an invasion was really very, very fun. And I think you picked up this sort of sub genre, Kyle. Like they're all about like nostalgia in some way, right? Like Grabbers is, I've heard it described as an Amblin, Joe Dante, Gremlins sort of thing, and certainly Attack the Block is like trying to do its own anti-ET sort of thing, yeah. And in The World's End, we have the one character, Gary King, who's like stuck in the past and he can't help but seeing everything as Back to the Future or whatnot, except he's in a real live invasion.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I had Attack the Block has been on my list since we came up with the idea for this podcast. I was like, oh, like anybody who hasn't seen that, like I can't wait to like. So I'm so glad that we had a couple people who had never seen before and now got to experience that. And then from there, I sort of built out. I had not actually seen Grabbers before I put it on the list. I was researching another list of movies for down the line, which I guess we'll find out later on this year. And this came up and I sort of read the synopsis. I'm like, this fits in exactly with what I was doing. And like all three of those movies just like magnets came together. And I was like, that's it. That's my triangle right there. So let's start with that. Let's start with the one that was, I think, new to all of us, which is back in the far off year of 2012, a little film called Grabbers. So I guess, how did Grabbers grab you?
I think Grabbers it sort of had a throwback, like low-key perfect attention to the creature.
Yes.
The fact that it does such a good job at hiding the creature for so long before we actually see what it's doing. We see it spits out of the cage and we see it makes noise and people get dragged away, but you don't see a tentacle. You don't see any of that for so long. And I thought that was just a real sort of Jaws level treat. And then when you do get rewarded by seeing it, it's this Lovecraftian kind of Cthulhu tentacle thing. And it's not bad. Like it's not a joke as a character or as a creature. I thought it was really, really solid. I have no axes to grind about this.
Oh,
movie.
yeah. So
lest we forget.
That's right. Anybody else have axes that they want to grind before we get too far into Grabbers?
I don't have an axe to grind about Grabber, but I have an axe to point at. I want to use the axe to point at something.
Sure.
In any horror movie I've ever seen, this has the most amount of crossfades. Like, I know that's so detailed and weird to bring up, but the amount, there's like 35 crossfades, and that's just something you don't see in a horror movie because you use cuts as weapons to go from one, but every scene ends with people just sort of being like, well, then we gotta go. And then just staring at the camera as it slowly goes from one to one. Like, if they were in real time, that would be like watching Kevin from the Wonder Years while like the narration goes. He's like, oh my God, he's schizophrenic.
Yeah.
So that took a lot of getting used to. The only other extra ground is I thought the music was unfortunately terrible. Really for such an understated, grounded, funny process movie that actually has some terror in it. No one let the composer know that like there's kind of like a high concept joke going on. He was like bum 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 bum, and when you have such beautiful music from that area of the world, to use none of it and to use very bombastic American seeming horror music. Those were my only problems with the film. Those I wish that could have been those both of those things lacked the elegance of some of the rest of the film. Going off of what Pete said, I assumed when this movie started, I was like, oh, I get it. It was made for $3, but they got some good actors, and we're never going to really see the monster. It's going to be a lot of, oh no, and then people being sucked out. And then when we saw it, I was like, wait, what was I know where the money went if this cost like some money, because that creature was no joke.
Yeah.
Like, it looked legitimately good. And the little baby creatures looked legitimately good. They were like adorable in like a weird gremlin-y, baby gremlin-y kind of way. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, the little Grogu's, of the world. Yeah, I'm surprised that you don't see those on merchandise anywhere. They're so cute. But yeah, it has this sort of, it starts off and continues on maybe a little too long, I think. Tommy's saying, like, as an Irish travelogue movie, like, it's set in Ireland, and but it's made by, UK people and UK money. And just had this feeling of like, oh, we're in Waking Dead Divine Land, and look how beautiful these vistas are. And so... Yeah, and then so it does sort of stay in that mode, or past when we discover there are monsters. But then I do really like that at the end, Tommy, where like becomes travelogue again, these long shots, and then we have these slow cross fades into the beach. Like, sequel set up. We have alien eggs that no one has seen. But my only axe, I guess, is the poster. I was trying to find a good poster, like, where's the poster with money? And it seems like it's such a small movie, and yet everything has gone into the production of the creature. But it's sort of, it makes you think you're in a movie that's not going to necessarily have control of itself. Like there are no good publicity materials for this movie. Again, a movie I'd never heard of, and apparently didn't do too well in America, but it's much better than it looks. So if you're looking at the list on Letterboxd, like, what's Kyle doing? No, it's much better than the promos that make it look.
Yeah. Wasn't it a huge smash at like some film festival?
Yeah, it hit the film festivals really big, and then just faded. Like, it never got whatever. I mean, as much as it's now a den of evil, the Miramax effect of like sort of like they would find independent film and really boost it, and they never really found anybody that would boost it, and so it sort of like had its time, and then it sort of just disappeared. And that's why I was so glad that I sort of discovered it as I was digging around.
Sure. Yeah, this is one to share. I think it adequately captures this. And I'll say it's a stereotype because I haven't been to Ireland, but it satisfyingly captures the what I imagine is the cultural aesthetic of this village in Ireland. And one of the things I love as it leans in on the cultural aesthetic is that the key sort of resolution to protecting themselves is to just be drunk.
Yes,
right. Which is, I mean, they sort of dance around an alcohol problem that our principal character has, and yet like this is a movie that is exuberant in its use of alcohol in, I think, a really funny way, which is, I guess, interesting, and it brings me to a potential axe.
Okay.
That I didn't know that I had until just now.
Wait, we need. This is like what, a hatchet?
Yeah, maybe this is a hatchet. Yeah, right.
All right.
What the old Donaghy? I don't remember his name, but the old drunk had the stuff that he did his homebrew in the clear glass bottle, and everyone who drank it did that. They did it was very hard to drink. The way that was cut and edited into the film made me think that was actually the secret, that we were going to have a rug pull, that everybody was drinking pints of beer, but actually the only people that were saved were the people who had drunk the really hard stuff. Did anybody see that in this thing? Did I just make that up?
It plays a little fast and loose. I mean, because the creature also just kills people by not eating them, but by throwing like the doctor across the entire island.
Yeah, that was
so fantastic. I wasn't watching it like watching that to pay off, but that's a good point, Pete. It's interesting.
Yeah, for the rules, it was like when they established that the alcohol would poison it. It's like, well, yes, but that doesn't stop it from killing you.
Yeah.
It's just that it doesn't like it.
But the fact that that's what they poured down its gullet for the very end, maybe that's the final.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not the mud on Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator, where it's like now all of a sudden it like ignores you because it has, you know, it's sort of like, yeah, you can still, it'll still kill you and still die, but it also might not like it.
Right.
So, right. That's a defense.
Well,
it just can't eat you, so it just doesn't do any good. Yeah.
The alcohol is such a source of good sort of lampoon sequences, right? Her trying to walk quietly across the bar of the larva, but being just blitzed drunk was awesome.
Having every character at a severe disadvantage for this final battle.
Heroes, but being such a mess. I think
fantastic thing.
This movie lives and dies on one thing. It's drunken Lisa.
Yeah.
It's the straight-laced playing drunk, and not like a hick drunk, but like a completely adorable, funny, likable drunk, because that carries the movie a lot. Because there's a lot of the movie takes a while to get going for me. Like there's a part of the movie when it really gets into the pub. That's when the movie really like rockets forward, and it's exciting. And her getting that drunk and being so much more fun than she was before is really, it's neat. That's incredibly good casting. And I want to get into casting with Attack the Block also. That a lot of the reasons that I think these work so well is casting.
Yeah, I agree. My only axe to grind on this is I think the love story doesn't work at all. Like, I think she's adorable, and I think he's kind of a lump. And it's sort of like the more they push the two of them together, I was like, I'm sorry, there's just not chemistry there. It has nothing to do with the actors, who are both fantastic and have been in other things and been magnificent in it. There's nothing there. And so it's like the more they hit that note, it's sort of like, yeah, okay, just cut back to the monster.
It feels like a 2011 thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny how that works, though, because for me, like, as I'm watching them relate to one another, it wasn't like, oh, that's not working for them. It really got me thinking, why do women like men?
Yes.
Sometimes, like, just writ large. This relationship is so bad. It makes me question all of them.
Yeah, she should have more of a crush on the grabber.
Yeah.
But it's like the ending of Grease that's, become maligned, where like she becomes a drunk to get the man, and she, like, why doesn't he sober up to get her? Why does he?
So so that part didn't work. But like
the Three Stooges-y sort of action stuff is so funny, because you are scared for them, but it's this thing like, hey, barricade the table and push it over here, but like she's probably pulling the table, and you can't even communicate with her enough to like get a straight answer out of her, let alone like coordinate this survival horror sort of barricade everything. Just a twist on it that I never would have occurred to me, right, of making everybody need to get drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just ask the question, and maybe this is part of our of a bit we need to do about each movie. Or Kyle, if you have another plan for this, I am curious your take on what makes this movie explicitly British, and knowing it's Irish, British, whatever. What is it that sort of is the cultural sort of fabric or tapestry that makes this a unique item? Could this have been made in Passaic?
Yeah, I think that there is a Stephen King element to this, where it's like, on the island, or even Mike Flanagan, kind of that sort of isolated community, monster attacks and do that. But I think they do a really good job of, like Tommy was talking about, establishing the ordinary, so that when the bad stuff happens, you kind of get it. And then that cultural landmark of the pub, like, sure, like we have bars and stuff too, but there is the town square of this town is the pub. That's where everybody goes. Everybody knows everybody. And so that's where everything gathers. So I think there's that part of it too. That's where your friends are, but that's also where safety is. And it's also where the thing that's going to stop the monster is. Like, everything sort of gravitates to that central point. I think that's what makes it.
I agree. And I think along that exact same line, I love what you said so much. I want to say things too.
Say things.
All three of these movies, and it feels very British. It's very much about the Cornetto trilogy. Each of his movies, it feels very British filmish to never be like, let's call in the big gun.
Yes.
Instead, it's let's circle the wagons in this village, in this cottage. It's like, we are it. What you see at the end of your yard is what we have to deal with. There's no FBI. There's no MI6 being called in for some reason or another. Like, what's his name? Peter Wright. Edgar Wright seems obsessed with these small little like cottage village kind of places, and something is actually deeply wrong or secretive or cultish, or they're all alien robots. There's something about it which is just like these self-contained units.
Yes, I think that there's a strong sense of community in all of these. And one of the things I really like about Grabbers in particular is there's no a-hole.
Yeah.
There are people who are like not as good on this stuff, but like usually is, in every one of these kind of horrors is like, I'll do it, or like, like who throws open the barrier.
We need to capture it and save it and sell it to make a machine out of it.
There's no
to the army.
Yeah, that's right. There's no Wayland Yutani. Yeah, exactly. It's everyone in it is just they're trying to survive or they're trying to defeat it, and that's it. Like there's no ulterior motive, and then also like you're saying, they're not calling in the military outside.
You get
things.
the feeling that
there
isn't any.
Yeah, try to get through the night.
Just this place.
Yeah,
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a sort of existential hopelessness that permeates all of these, like the climax of all of these that they have to get over to win. And it even, like, it goes back to Monty Python, right? Looking at comedy still is existential hopelessness. Like the muck farmers when Balin in Holy Grail, like it's just like they've already lost. There's this experience that their life is already lost, and that's what makes the conflict funny, is watching them overcome this through shenanigans, right? Shaun of the Dead. We're going to start the battle by throwing our less favorite albums at the zombies, right? Like that's like we've given up. We have to use our albums now.
There's a a strand in like Irish literature and cinema about this kind of like disrespect but also love for authority figures, right? It was like, oh, they're useless, so like, oh, why don't we feed the priest to it? Right? And the priest hears like, it's like, oh fuck, the priest heard me, and like swearing in front of the priest, and the priest is also a sinner, and like that's there in Grabbers, and then extended out to like, oh, these Garda, right? Like these national police, and once you're in these small towns, like, oh, they're useless anyways. And that's part of what Lisa has to recognize, is that like the way that she's going to do well here is to not be like, at the top of the hierarchy, but be one of the just folks here in the bar. Yeah.
Is that because Irish people were maybe distrustful of like Imperial UK?
That's probably, yeah. And like, yeah, that might be it. And like, yeah, even if you get to the top of Irish society, then you're already kind of suspicious. Yeah. Well, like, what did you do to get up there, right? Like, why aren't you just like all of us? Yeah. I think that's part of it. That's probably is, right? So like, no one in town is like, it's not, it's like Jaws, but there's no mayor here. Right. It's like Jaws, but the outside forces, like the marine biologist, doesn't know what's going on either and is kind of useless as well. Right. So, yeah, by the end of it, they just have to sort of all become, this group dynamic like you're talking about. And it's a little bit different in Attack the Block and The World's End, which I think is super interesting. Where they are within England, but they're so isolated, right? These communities are put off, like the forgotten town in the middle of the north, right? And then like this forgotten block, where even though it's in London, in the center of the world, it's like these people are not worth our time, saving.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the monsters then. One of the things I really like about the Grabbers is that even though they're from aliens and their breeding cycle is wild, like what an exciting day it's having, that it actually feels much more like an animal. There's so many of like the sort of movie monsters act like soldiers, or that they have a particular hatred of people or want to just tear them apart, but these don't really care. And I like that thing about it. Like they want to have them, but there's not the sort of the xenomorph kind of thing of like, you're going to be a broodmare and then you're going to make another one and then that one. Like that whole thing. It's an animal going about its business. It doesn't hate. It doesn't care. Like, it's just like, hey, I'm here to do what animals do. And I really liked that part. So it wasn't, even though you don't have like sort of the personality of a lot of the other ones, I kind of liked that we're just to the line of that Lovecraftian horror of like, it just doesn't care. And I really liked that. What did you guys think of the creature?
Well, like as like a sea creature, right? So it's brooding, it's having these babies, but it appears to be one of those creatures that spawns and then doesn't care about what happens to its baby. It doesn't like take care of them, doesn't protect them, right? So it just sort of like spews everything everywhere. Yeah, it's got there's like a male and a female, but they're not like husband and wife, right? They don't cuddle down there beneath the sea.
But wasn't there a little bit of they're following that scent? What was that about?
That's an Attack
he's
the
wearing
Block.
it on his jacket.
I'll be right back.
Well, yeah. So that was something that was unclear to me. Is actually what is the squirting thing that they do? Is that just, is there a pheromone or is it defense mechanism? Like, I didn't really get how that
didn't
fit
seem
into the
to
cycle.
hurt anybody. I mean, it was a shock, and but it's not like it blinded them or anything.
Right. Like
and
you were talking about the whiskey or the stuff he made. I thought that was going to come back.
And it
that
never
it was
did.
like, oh, you've been marked by it or something.
Yeah.
But then it never really did. Did I just miss that?
I didn't catch it.
Okay.
I don't know. I thought that there was something that one of them, but now I really think it was Attack the Block. So I'm going to stop that.
There was an interesting thing at the end, where I think the movie it holds so well to its ideology of making this a creature that doesn't care, right? And I think that makes the creature scarier. And then they're able to distract it, and it chases them. And then it has a sentience that it didn't. I don't necessarily think that the movie allowed it to earn. It was fun. I like watching it roll with the tentacles. That was cool. But I do think in the light of making that thing that doesn't care, it loses the thread as soon as it decides to chase, when there is plenty of food that it hasn't dabbled in right back in the pub. I just don't.
Yeah.
I didn't.
It does get very Hollywood.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
It does really set up a great joke from Aliens. Jim, if you remember when she screams, "Get away from him, you C word," instead of "you bitch," it's the C word.
Yeah, it's a British version.
I don't know, that's using the forklift like Sigourney was using the
absolutely.
robot suit. I thought that was really fun.
Oh, that was really fun as a final sort of climactic battle between two people on a limited set using as big of what they could make. It looked great. It really looked great. I had zero problems with any of the effects in this thing. I just thought it was really solid.
And I did love the local swearing, the local curses. It feels authentic Irish. I don't know, I've never been to Ireland, but yeah, it feels like we're getting some local color, and it could not be just anywhere. I mean, just these people are stock characters who belong in this town, and we need to have them. I was thinking about that. Like, I know it's sort of stereotypical, but like, we have this character Paddy, who's the lobster fisherman. He's like the quote town drunk, but I'm like, how much does that apply in a town like this where where there's multiple?
There seems to be one place to go for fun. Everything else is just fish related.
Yeah.
There's no recreation in this town.
Anybody want to ride a bike? What?
Or
we can go down to the ocean on this side, and then we get tired of that, go down to the ocean on the other side of the island.
I mean, it really is. This is the Banshees of Inisherin, like 80 years, right?
Yeah.
It was this, because I watched them in order, and this was the first time I felt like, if you wanted to anthropomorphize it, it's like I woke up my subtitles button. Because I always have to watch it, my subtitles. I would imagine be like, oh, are we watching Peaky Blinders again? Like when was the last time that I had to use it for the first 20 minutes? And I had to do it with Grabbers. I definitely had to do it with Attack on the Block.
Yeah. I tried to resist doing it for Attack the Block, but I needed it.
Just to get into, and after a while, it's weird that you sort of get into that mode where it's like, these words now make sense, but for a while, it's rough.
All right, so you have any final thoughts on Grabbers before we move into the inner city?
Thank you for putting it on my radar. That's really cool.
Yeah. All right, cool. Great. All right, so let's head to the city and talk about Attack the Block. This is a movie that I saw the trailer for, and I was like, sometimes you see something and go, oh, this was made for me. Like I watched the trailer and was like, oh, I am your target audience. Yes, please. I will absolutely be there. And I actually had a chance to see it, in the movie theater with very, very few people, because this is another one that did not do terribly well at the box office. But it was I look forward to, and at the time it was all nobodies. Like, there's really no sort of major stars.
Nick Frost wasn't Nick Frost yet.
Yeah, he was, but he's also fifth lead. I mean, like, he's he's in the trailer, so that's sort of like that. I think that's part of the thing, is sort of like look, there's somebody like, but the rest of it was which I think does really well, because in a horror movie like this, which, I mean, it is an action horror, but it's still a horror movie, not knowing who's going to live and die by the billing is exciting. And so you really don't know if any of these people are going to make it. So I guess for those of you who this was your first time seeing it, how does it hit you here in 2024?
It is just so fun and kinetic, and yes, it gets bloody, and yes, we have children getting torn apart by wolf gorilla things. But it is so joyful, which was the surprise to me. Like, it is not grim. It is not, although they're dealing with class and poverty, it's not like poverty porn or anything like that. I just really loved these kid characters, and Jodie Whittaker as the one, like, grown up in there. Oh, and then they pick up Luke Treadway and Nick Frost. I just like all of them, and it reminds me of the best of, like, horror comedies. I guess Grabbers is a lot like Tremors, but this one really sort of has the feeling of Tremors, of, like, making this community and just loving them. And for a movie where everyone ends up in jail, arrested by the police, it still feels like this victory at the end, like this victory over the man that really surprised me.
I thought it was incredibly confidently made and so stylish without being overly fussy or like, look what we're doing. Like, it's not like self-consciously cool or weird. It's just like
clever.
It's just really confident and cool and knows what to do. I feel like Blockbusters, not the store, but the Blockbuster films could learn so much from the economy of this film. I was blown away by how much ground we covered, how much we learned about characters, how much we loved characters in such a little amount of time. And the action never felt like, oh, now it's time for this set piece. Instead, it kept surprising me. And going back on it, because I wanted to bring up casting again for this, the kids aren't necessarily likable archetypes. I mean, they attack and rob a woman in the beginning. I was like, wait, is this who we're following? And then they all took down their masks, and I was like, wait, he's old now. And who's this kid that looks like Timothée Chalamet? And they were all so likable. That's good casting. I cared about them after seeing them terrorize a woman in a dark street just to be jerks. I was rooting for them the entire time.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's the magic trick of this movie, is that you follow characters who the Punisher would kill in the first 10 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
Like, these are thugs, these are criminals, these are
the ones that the creature picks off first in other versions of this movie, and instead you're following him. It's fascinating.
This was exactly what I got out of this movie, and I think I got it the first time and the last time. This is a story of delinquents to heroes, and this movie, when you talk about confidence, like allowing the delinquent part to shine, right? It's not just I walked past a worm on a sidewalk and didn't put it in some dirt. It's like we did horrible things, and we did it to someday Doctor Who. Like, come on, they are really bad guys, and I think that allowing us to feel for them positively is a real treat. They do the same thing to with Nick Frost's character to make him an affable character, and he's a weed steward, right? Like that. I thought that was just straight funny. So I love the movie. I love how it also centers on a bespoke community, right? This is to my leading question earlier. This movie could not have happened in Passaic. This movie happened here in this part of this little world, and you cannot take it anywhere else, just like you can't take Grabbers out of this village either. Like, it is a unique subculture of a subculture of a subculture that is dealing with things all on their own that they don't understand. And I thought that was brilliant.
the Wikipedia page describes some of the actors who were cast as speaking multicultural London English, which is, I'm sure, how they describe it themselves. Right? They go, "Oh, yes, we speak multicultural London English." We do, but it feels so, again, authentic. It feels like these are multi-generational characters. The actors feel that way too, right? So, like when Jodie Whittaker, they're like, we don't know who you are. And she's like, "Oh, I moved in a couple months ago." And there's a little bit like, "Oh, I see. Like, you're not really of the block, right? And we are, and you look down at us." And there's that funny, poignant scene where she's like, "Well, I might not stay, right? Because you all mugged me." And they're like, "Why? What's wrong in this neighborhood, right? What are you trying to say, you mugging victim?" That just feels really lived in. I believe all those characters live there, and that they, I don't know, like I'm not someone myself who's like, I love my turf or my neighborhood or my block or my stoop or whatever. But by the end of this, I was like, yeah, this block, like I want to be a part of this block. Even if it means I have to get jumped into a gang.
Well, yeah, I think we have a different perspective because you being Las Vegas, me being in Phoenix, we are in places that should not exist. Only by sheer force of will are we able to
nature and God.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, like also Phoenix and Vegas have these pre-built, pre-planned neighborhoods. They probably have some of the same names of Sun City and Anthem, and you probably have some of the same places. Yeah. And then there is not culture the same way. Like this feels like, okay, we've made these Wyndham Towers, and they maybe started that way as like a generic place for people to raise their families, and now it's become the block, over whatever it is, 40, 60 years.
But I love what you just said. Like there is a certain sense of earned credibility of these characters, and that she hadn't earned it yet. And that's because they made this microculture of the block what it is. And it's good and it's bad and it's all the things. But what's so beautiful about it is, like, when the block, like, they can treat each other terribly and mug each other and do all that stuff. But when the block needed it, it rose to the occasion, right? When it needed sort of collective action, it rose. So I think it's really great. There's another piece that I don't know. I don't think it's an original thought. But there is this thing about the creatures that when he says they're so black you can't see them. They're so black you can't see them. And I wonder if there is, in a movie that is otherwise so multicultural, like the gang is made up of all different races, that I wonder if the film doesn't know how resonant lines like that are to other cultures.
There's another line in the movie of the blackest of the black are invading the area. This movie has subtext to it, if you want to take it that way.
Yeah.
Of how certain people can see certain different cultures coming in and taking over their block.
It's a thing that's so black you can't see it, and it's a threat.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a horrible, terrible thing in the form of these creatures. So I thought that was interesting.
It's the kind of threat that you can't see until it's too late.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's a very NIMBY, very white flighty kind of way of thinking about that kind of.
Sure.
idea.
Look what's happening in my neighborhood. Right.
Yeah. They're coming in. One of the things I was struck by this time watching it is having this group of kids. I mean, they are kids. Like when you find like that in the moment when she actually sits down with John Boyega and says like, "Oh, how old are you?" And he's like 16, and she's like,
"Yeah,
they're kids, but." They are.
Are you a 16-year-old stormtrooper? I swear you look like
that. But they are so brave. And the thing that amazes me is that like in any situation, they immediately jump into action. Like as soon as it's like, oh man, he got taken by the police. What are you gonna do? It's like, nope. They like make a plan and they go and attack the police. I mean, like they jump in, they run into with axes, whatever weapons they can buy, with chains, whatever they can have, they run at these things to defend their people. Like it is a really amazing group coherence, because like they're just children, and yet they show more bravery than we've seen in like groups of like squads of people going, even in like The Descent. Like these kids were just like absolutely willing to just throw themselves in to defend the rest of their crew.
Oh, that's a really great point, Kyle, because at no point does the group tear itself asunder.
Right.
You compare it to The Descent, the group tears itself asunder. I just used asunder twice, 3 times.
Yeah.
He rhymed asunder with asunder. Yeah, and it's great because they also become the heroes of this place that they know so well, and we learn I don't know if we learn the terrain, but we understand that they learn the terrain so well. So at one point they're riding their mopeds and motorbikes and scooters like through all of these different walkways around this place, and we're like, wow, they're the perfect people to do that. They could zip around on these little walkways that aren't meant for bikes and things, right? Because they're ruffians, because they're ragamuffins. They're I'm trying to think of an actual term people use.
They're used to rowdy down. A lot of their life is filled with horse feathers. Yes. I know what you're saying.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that they know how to get around in the way that like police come in, the armed police coming in, they get to, like 2 floors up by the time the movie's over, but the kids know how to navigate this place and which doors have the security gates and which don't.
Right. The police are such a dumb, blunt object.
And they have that lovely moment that sort of like Get Out does, where the police show up and it's not, it's, oh no.
Right.
And so like when the police show up, they're not like, oh good, they're going to help us. They're like, run.
I'm going to use a term that's only a little bit less dated than all the nonsense you guys have just said. They're lost boys, right? They're the lost boys.
Yeah.
And because that's their savvy. They're smarter and they're more prepared than the authorities and then the adults. Because a lot of this movie is so much about, kids demonstrating their agency and their capability in a way that adults don't.
No parents at all in this whole thing.
That's where Hollywood would mess it up, in that when they all split up and go to their individual apartments and then to grab some sort of weapon, then to meet back up, that's where we would be overloaded by boohoo sad backstories of I'm a father and I'm literally made of belts or something like to make it okay that they are ruffians. But instead, like some of them were like, don't forget pie or whatever. Like it was just like little snatches of life and then they were back in the world, which was cool.
Right.
It was really refreshing.
And what's great about that is it was so economical that they showed all the little snatches of pie. And then that earned the conversation with Boyega when he said he doesn't live with anybody but his uncle who's never there. Right. That made that a more palpable sort of emotional moment. And it's so short. Like it's not a big part of the movie at all.
Yeah, I want to get back to what Tommy was talking about with this casting of Boyega. So he's the first of these kids that we see, and he's like, showing his face and glowering at her as he's robbing her in the first couple of minutes. But there's something about his face that's just likable, that like you could see how maybe somebody else could think it's scary, but you don't think it's scary. He's just a nice kid. Like you could tell it's a mask, right? And then they find this what turns out to be a female monster, and they go and just kick it to death. Right? They just go and like, hey, let's murder the heck out of this thing. And then they carry it around with them down the street, and it's like this badge of honor, like and it's like this fun thing, but it's also kind of sad. Like they're putting on this show like for the girls down the block. Like this is how they get respect is through violence. None of this is communicated. We're doing this like podcaster voice like hey but like it's just so, again, I know everyone's been saying it, economical, it's so quick, it's so fast, they don't dwell on it, and we're just like, yeah, this guy, I get why the bad people look at him and like, oh, this guy's the worst, but like we know better in the audience, we like him so much better than the people in the movie.
Yeah, and like you're saying with like having him in that mask, he does not have a lot of expression, which actually is a really hard thing to do, especially in all these situations. And then you only see him smile at the end when he has been captured and hears the people chanting his name. Like the rest of the time, he is stone-faced because he is in his professional mode. Like he is showing off what he thinks that hard men are like.
Really good.
Yeah.
It's amazing that he's that young.
Yeah.
It's like when he passes Star Wars, I'm like, of course.
Yeah.
Of course he did a blockbuster film. He was ready for it. I hope that he gets the career that Daniel Radcliffe has, where he's now like, you've done your blockbusters, you paid your dues. Now you can make really interesting stuff that means something to you and bounce around, and not get sort of stuck in the cycle.
Yeah, he was in a wonderful mid-budget movie called The Woman King that didn't do well enough, where he plays the king to Viola Davis's general, and he's very good in that and very charismatic. But again, no one saw that one. But lovely, lovely movie.
Yeah, so you're going to talk a little bit about Joe Wright because, I'm sorry, Joe Cornish. Sorry, which the two around because he's similar. He has a lot of connection to Edgar Wright, and so they've done a lot of stuff together and stuff too. But like, I think an incredibly underrated filmmaker because this thing is tight as a drum. I mean, like it is so well constructed and put together in a way that his next movie was not. So I don't know what happened.
What was it?
The Kid Who Would Be King.
Ooh, interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I can't say I recommend it.
Yeah.
I saw it because I loved this movie so much. I was so excited that he had to do another one. And then I watched it. I was like, oh, all right. Like he heavily leaned into the Amblin of it all. And it was
Could that have been the shock of like having to deal with America, an American dumb
No, it was still a
system?
British thing. It was
still
like
British.
It was still like about a kid who gets Excalibur. He's like a 12-year-old kid. He gets Excalibur, and he's going to be the next. He's going to be the next king, and has to do it. And it's I don't know. We don't need to discuss that anyway, but it didn't quite come together, and the box office reflected that. But in this, I'm glad that he has announced that he's coming back to do another Attack the Block because this is so much from him because he also wrote it. Like this was a story that he was dedicated to tell.
And I think it was inspired because he was mugged, right? That is his story, and that you can kind of feel it, right? It feels. I don't think somebody who hadn't been through the experience like he would have written the delinquents as delinquent as he did.
But it's
personal.
Interesting that experience meant it went to this as. How did they, following them as the heroes as opposed to doing Death Wish?
Yeah, right.
It could very easily have gone like, oh, well, then we need to have somebody to come clean up these streets. But instead, he's like,
that actually feels kind of British.
Yeah.
Right. The main character's name is Bo Jornish, and we're supposed to. And he's really strong, and he's really cool, and all the ladies love him.
I saw an interview with him that he said that the character that is his self-insert is the kid who came there to buy drugs and gets caught up in this whole thing. Like the sort of the white guy who gets his dad's car smashed. He's like, that's me. That's
perfect.
His version.
That kid, what was that kid?
That makes sense.
He was really funny.
That's Luke. Luke Treadaway. He's a twin, and for some reason, his brother Harry plays villains, and Luke plays really nice, really nice, like college kids who get caught up in the wrong situation. But yeah, his brother Harry is like he's a bad guy on Star Trek, and I don't know, they're twins, they look alike, but they don't act alike for whatever reason.
All right. Well, then, any final thoughts on Attack the Block?
The monsters were legit. Really smart, elegant lo-fi, like not showing a lot, but just having those blue, those aren't eyes, having the blue teeth, mouths thing, do everything. It's such a great version of just showing less. Yeah, Pete already brought up Jaws, but like just showing a little bit less. They can be anything that you want them to. They're just fast. And they're spiky and they have teeth. What more do you need? It's great.
Yeah, teeth and claws. It's like Rex Basic. Not shooting acid. They don't like suddenly sprout wings. Like
smart.
They're gorilla dogs. They're just very direct. Like they have one attack, which is coming at you and biting you.
Yeah, I love the amorphous blob nature of them, that blackness. So that means that when they're coming towards you, you can't quite see how close they are to you until they start to bare their teeth, which at first are like eyes. So the closer they are to you, the more you get to see what's in there. And it's really neat. It's like that glow in the dark. There's probably a cooler name for it that looks like ravey, like very 2012, right? Like bioluminescence, dayglow, Yes. It looks like you're at a rave, or with that, or like a Joel Schumacher without going all the way there, right? So it's just this cool look without
you never go full Schumacher.
The entire movie.
There was a lot of weight.
None of the monsters had nipples.
Yeah, no nipples, and no one was wearing a roller skate.
So as my little piece of trivia, I got a chance to interview Terry Notary, who is known for all the Apes movies. He's the guy that taught people how to move like apes. Next, there's in motion capture, there's Andy Serkis, and then there's Terry Notary. Like he's the number 2 guy. And so he also did a bunch of stuff with Lord of the Rings stuff too. I was talking to him about his appearance in the Hulk back on the Marvel Movie Minute days. So that's what he told. But then in this, he was kind enough to stay around and do a speed round. And so I asked him about this because he is the lead creature in Attack the Block. He also is that.
Wow.
And basically, I wish I had a better trivia for you than him saying, yes, it was really hot in those fur costumes, and I couldn't see a thing. I was like, yep, that tracks. That tracks. Okay. Yeah.
No eye holes, you're saying, yeah.
Right,
creatures
exactly.
have no eyes.
And then following our Nick Frost, who crosses over into our next film, Edgar Wright's The World's End. So had everyone seen this already?
Yes.
I think that was what you said at the start, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So now revisiting it here in 2024, before we get into the axes, how did it strike you? We having been through, nearly the end of the world. At a time when we couldn't go out to any pubs and stuff too. How does it hit you now?
Yes, I have the opposite of an axe to grind. I have a rubber chicken because I remembered I mixed this slightly up with Hot Fuzz only in one way, in that I think personally, with all due respect, I love Edgar Wright. I think Hot Fuzz desperately overstays its welcome when it has that one part where you're leaving the village and the shootout after shootout. I get it, like it's supposed to be on purpose way too much and way too many times with the same thing. This movie I thought was that movie. And when it's only 38 minutes in, when we first learned that they're aliens, I was like, I was right. It's this movie. It's going to go on forever. And there's how many pubs left? And I was wrong, because this movie runs and moves and is smart and is tight. And I really, really love that about it. So it's an axe I thought I had to grind. I was mixing it up with another Edgar Wright movie. Is that weird? I always want to say something with axes, even if I don't have an axe to grind.
What about you, Pete?
I can't. I mean, I don't know how many superlatives I can lob on this movie, because honestly, from the first time I saw it, it was a fantastic Edgar Wright sort of action film. And then I kept aging. Mm-hmm. And now every time I watch it, the first 38 minutes are the minutes that mean something to me. Watching him adjust to the community. And all of these movies are about communities rallying together, right? All of them are about the same thing. But this one deals with it in a way that is so poignant and precise and sharp around the nostalgia and the emotion that we carry as it, and I'll say, I try not to make too many gendered comments, but as men, as we age, how much harder it is to make strong friendships.
Yes.
And so we try to go back in time and keep and bring those friendships that we thought were incredible to the now. And does it work? Does it not work? This movie deals with so many of those things that are just very, very close to me. Personally, I just really relate to a lot of this movie, and it's such a goofy movie, and it's cut so tight, so humorously. And it's great. It's collecting axes from other movies.
Yeah, I liked it a lot more this time. When I had seen it in the theaters, that was fine and fun, and but having such high expectations from Edgar Wright and Shaun of the Dead and Scott Pilgrim's kind of my jam.
Me too. Love it.
Yeah, it's the best. But a lot better this time again. I think knowing what is going to happen at the end and what the movie is really about. Because the first time I had seen it, I had trouble connecting with Simon Pegg's character. Of like, well, why are we following this person? I don't, quote unquote, like him, his likability factor. But seeing it a second time and sort of knowing what is at the heart of this character, and maybe, now I'm his age and I'm 40 now, something about that was very touching. Yeah. And that first 37 minutes or so before the aliens come in were working a lot for me. And then once we have the aliens, I love a pod people movie. Well, no, that's not true. I hate them. They're terrifying. They're I have nightmares about pod people.
You mean like Invasion of the Body Snatchers?
Yeah, exactly. Where your friends are being replaced, and they make this pitch to you about why you should join them. I have actual screaming nightmares about that. Yeah, and so seeing that here, which I, for whatever reason, had not been in my memory of this movie, that it really is a pod person movie. It's not just fighting robots. It's about, you could have your youth back. That was particularly touching at the end once I got through it this time of like, you don't have to be you anymore. You could be the 17-year-old you. And look, we can even have doubles of your friends, and they're having their own life and having, there's triples and quadruples of them, so don't worry about them. You don't have to drag them down, right? By having them in your personal heaven, you could have your own. That was really, really scary and creepy in a way that I had not remembered.
Yeah, I had a lot of the same reaction. As I remember seeing this in theaters when it came out and being disappointed and like, oh, well, you didn't land the third one. The first two were great, and this one just didn't do it. And I remember being in the same place that a lot of people are with Star-Lord at the end of Infinity War, where it's like, you ruined everything because you were still you they were almost there and you messed the whole thing up. And now watching it again, it hit me on a whole different level just because I'm that much older and I'm that much closer to where they're at and in their lives and things. And then sort of now paying more attention at the end and going, oh no, this was always how it was gonna. He maybe just exacerbated it or started it then, but this is how it was always gonna end that way. It is a bleak ending. The world is not destroyed, but it's damaged severely. But when you sort of pay attention to all the stuff that they're talking about, you realize it's not Gary's fault entirely. Like it was just like he ended the relationship before the worst things could have happened. If they had continued on, who knows how many the actual humans would have actually, what was the percentage of how people are in this town? A couple thousand, and there's 3 who actually went along with this.
I guess on a first viewing, I thought it was 3 really disparate movies. Yeah. Right. There's the first chunk before there are robots, and then there's the robot part, and then this post-apocalyptic part. But which of course it is there, but I think I was like, oh, whiplash from Act 1 to Act 2, and then this epilogue. But this time I was like, oh yeah, knowing where it was going, like, oh, this is all built in perfectly to this. It is about choosing yourself over these connections with your friends, and then over these connections you have with the network, right? Your phones in your pockets. And I don't know where they would be with that podcast.
I mean,
that
had to survive. We don't have the call, but we do have the podcast.
Right. Let me ask, just because we're on this movie in particular, and we're talking about Cornetto. All 3 of these movies deal with very similar themes when you break them down, and they feel to me like they are building on one another. And at World's End, or the World's End, sort of becomes the final form of the 3 sort of spiritual siblings. What's your take collectively on how the movies work together, knowing that they're sort of the same story told in very, very different ways, yet of a piece? How does that work?
I had also sort of resented the idea of them as a trilogy to begin with, and now this second time watching, I'm like, okay, because at first I was like, no, they're not really a trilogy, and it started kind of as a joke that Edgar Wright was saying, and then people have been putting there like, oh, film nerds love to make trilogies where there are no trilogies. Sure. Yeah, but now seeing it, and again, knowing where the movie's ending, and it seems to be this mature answer to the kind of Deus Ex Machina that we get that's so satisfying at the end of Shaun of the Dead, where it's like, hey, Shaun, you have to choose between your friends and your relationship with your girlfriend. You have to choose between your adulthood and your childhood. And then we get to have it both ways, which is a fun, totally satisfying. We're like, great. He chose his girlfriend over the friend, but then still gets to have the friend. right? Which I won't spoil, I guess, because people might not have seen that if they're listening to this. And then here it's like, no, that is a movie fairy tale. Like this, like The World's End is like the real deal. Like that does not work. You have to choose. And to make this character go through that, I think is just even deeper because you're comparing all three of the movies, right? I'm glad that we did this so I could get over my resistance to the idea of the whole Cornetto thing.
Tommy, where do you stand?
I would need to see. I haven't seen Shaun of the Dead in a really long time. I'm not familiar enough with the trilogy recently to be able to go through, but I can say that these three, the thing that I can never separate from a lot of especially sci-fi horror movies that take place in England, I always am looking through it of a lens of this was one of those cultures that ruled the world.
Yes.
And then did not.
Yeah.
And everything is like the amount of history, the legendary history of everything that they went through, and they had their pick and choose. I mean, at one point it was the Egypt, like certain cultures, they become stagnant at some point, or people rebel and they go away. America, your turn is coming up soon. As history, I mean, our reign as the world superpower will not last. It cannot. It's not how it works in history. But so I always see everything through that. And so especially with horror movies or sci-fi movies, I'm always trying to make it work of like where you are in the food chain, like where you were and what it's saying about when a new thing comes in, how you're able to react to it. I'm always sort of, so I don't have a fully thought out, because this was just sprung on me, idea of how to talk about that. But that's how I saw a lot of these. It's a culture that was on top, and then the people that were left behind, one way or another, how are they dealing with the advancement that is being brought to them?
Okay, so I think that's really interesting, because Shaun of the Dead, you deal with this encroaching force that is outnumbering you and challenging, to your historical example, previous supremacy, right? And Hot Fuzz, it's sort of, look, this is the older generation trying to come together in a way to reestablish norms that were lost long ago by way of the cult, right?
There you go.
And then, this movie, it's sort of put it in a cup and shake it all up. And like, here it is. But also we have generational guilt. I don't know. Kyle, I'm sorry. What do you think? Any thoughts?
No, yeah, I'm sort of the same way. I really like when groups of actors come together and filmmakers and like all that stuff, like, and then do something again, but it's not necessarily a sequel. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of that kind of stuff that has produced some really interesting things. Trying to like map it all out, I think ends up just it makes for great YouTube videos, but I don't know that it actually is what was in their mind directly and try to do that, except every once in a while they would sort of wink and nod, but not so much that it was stopping the movie to be like, remember this from Shaun of the Dead? Like it's just them doing that. I think
Thank goodness for that. Yeah,
to its benefit. I think the smart choice they did is that Gary King should have been Nick Frost if you'd been following the thing, because he's the lovable idiot. He's like, you try stuff too. But them switching those roles, I think, really made this movie way more than it would have been, because then you get to see, oh, Nick Frost is way more talented than we had given him credit for, because he was always just like lovable idiot, like, and now you get to see him like he is a smart, sensible, put together,
like the Danny McBride kind of character.
Run through the fence, exactly, like the fat guy fall down, ha ha ha. That's and that could have been it, but the fact that they sort of went, how about we do it the other way? And the person that everybody, the charming guy that everyone loves, who's in the Mission Impossible movies, why don't we make him the worst of all of them? And maybe the worst person in the world. And that is a bold choice for this kind of movie.
And we're going to put the weight of the future on this idiot's shoulder.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And like the call to action comes and he fails, but he stays true to the terrible person that he is right to the very end. I was laughing hysterically at the end when everything is coming down and they run for the ladder and he shoves someone out of the way to get to the ladder first. I was like, oh, even then, even when they're all gonna die, he's still like, Gary first. That is a strong choice to put as your lead character stuff too. I can't say enough fantastic things about Edgar Wright. The way that he constructs all the things, that he plants something at the beginning of the movie and 2 hours later pays it off.
Right.
The patience, the precision. I was just actually talking to a friend of the show, Rob Tabasco, and I was saying how you like watch these kind of things and you kind of forget, because so many movies now are so shaggy where they just they're not tightly cut together, or they're just they're loose and
they're the mumblecore of film.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. But even like in your big budget blockbuster kind of stuff, they just let stuff die. But like Edgar Wright is like, nope, it has to be 12 frames, not 10. It has to, like he has everything figured out, and not in a Kubrickian way, but in a just trust me. I've already seen it in my head. I'll get you there, and he does.
I think the thing that he's always thinking about, it's musical.
Yes.
It's musical, so it's
excellent
beats.
Excellent point.
All of that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to think about the sound in The World's End, which is so crazy. If you see this movie in a theater, hopefully you all in the future can go and see that again. And hearing that in a real surround sound, like these electronic noises that start to overtake the soundtrack and like phone buzzings, it's really crazy. You leave the theater like, oh God, I am being controlled by my devices in a way that I've never seen in any other movie. And then that is musical, right? It's timed out. It's controlling, your body against your will with sound. Yeah, he's the best.
That's really funny you would say that. I was thinking about that, but it didn't make the connection till just now. This movie was just a few years too early because it deserves an Atmos mix.
Yes.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe for an anniversary, they'll go back in and move some sliders around. It like all three of these did not do especially well at the box office, but I think it has, like Scott Pilgrim, I think it has found an audience afterwards. And
enormous
now
audience.
Beloved.
Yes.
Where but where the sort of major movie going crowd, not so much.
Right.
I want to talk sort of broad things about all three, but like, is there anything we want to talk about? Well, I guess we can talk about aliens. Let's talk about the aliens a little bit, because we don't really see them.
We see one thing, and it works just as well as Attack of the Block. Just a strong blue light. Like, how little do you need to make something seem to have 9 people in a row walking down a thing and just these flashlights out of eyes? Every time I was like, nailed it. It hit. Every single time is like this visceral body. Like it's the light version of Donald Sutherland going, and body like this. And it was so effective. And what a a cost-effective way to be so effective. I love it.
And I think the idea of having them be action figures,
right?
I mean, they're toys. Like, we can get to the whole,
you just put them back together,
too.
Right.
But they're not Terminators,
right?
The idea is not that they're unstoppable. I mean, there is a giant robot that doesn't really, play a big factor in it. But they are breakable,
right?
Like, because none of the, and I think that goes along with the theme of they're also all disposable.
Yeah, because it's not an invasion. It's not an end game. It's a merger. That's what they say in the movie.
Yeah.
The idea is to make us like them. It's the commodification. It's the Starbucking of the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the horror.
Yeah.
It's the Starbucking.
Right. The uniformity, all the same.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that I don't know how it is in Britain, but like in America, we have like this anti-governmental, like we're afraid of them spying on us, right? And we're afraid of giving them information, but that we gladly will give that to Starbucks has all this information on me. Like, why does Starbucks need it? But I'm glad to have it for extra stars or whatever to get an extra scone. So this is like that. This is that corporate thing of like, hey, we don't want to kill you. Just come over. And there's all these perks to it of being with us.
I don't want anyone knowing anything about me. There's a Groupon for 23andMe.
Oh, well,
where I literally send my DNA to a faceless corporation who has already said they're sharing it with other corporations. Outstanding. Oh, it turns out I was always poor. Well,
yeah,
that was worth it.
Yeah, there is a nihilistic streak to this. There's an anti-establishment streak to this, but it's not so.
But it's not glum.
So like freshman year college, like it's much more subtle. It's much more like well, maybe institutions should be brought down. Like, maybe we shouldn't be giving all of our stuff to people and then trusting that they'll do the right thing with it. It's never hit over the head with it.
Freshman year of college. That's really actually quite good.
Yeah.
I just read Ayn Rand and I don't know how to react.
Right,
No,
exactly.
That is. Yeah, it's like the guy that's like, hey, I don't know about you guys, but sometimes these corporations, I think they're just in it for the money. Think about it. And everyone's like, wow. And like the older person's like, everyone knows that. What a dumb point.
Oh, okay. So let's. I don't have a direct questions written, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about the fact that this is a British invasion. Now we've seen a lot of American invasion stuff too, and it usually is a lot of it's a lot of the Michael Bay. It's we arm up, the troops come rolling in and stuff too, but here it's about the people pulling together and doing stuff there. So I kind of just broad strokes, like how does it hit you differently seeing our former rulers from a couple hundred years ago now having to deal with some of the same things that we've had to deal with in movies and how they react to it?
I kind of feel like we kind of talked about it. I'm not shutting down this part of the conversation, but just that idea of that there aren't other troops. There's not the bigger people. It's your community rising up is really interesting because we don't have a lot of that in a lot of, where you see that a lot in American movies is the Christian cinema. Christian cinema is always really about this very small community. They're not fighting against aliens, but it's very like, it's just these 8 people. Part of it might be money wise, but it's like there's a whole town and the whole town is 8 people and those 8 people and one of them is mean and then we'll end up loving Jesus. But it's just like this real like community first feeling, which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that comparison. I mean, if you think of an alien invasion set in Britain, like Thor 2, but that's an American movie, right? It's like, okay, this is happening and they're taking over Greenwich and it's going to come from the inside or whatever happens in that movie. But it is about like this that's happening here is about these global consequences, right? And we only get kind of lip service about that in The World's End, about how it's more than just this town. But then we just get right back into what does that mean for me if I'm trying to get back into a pub, right? Yeah. So it's people aren't coming from out of town to save you, and I like that about that. We don't get in either Grabbers or Attack the Block as we would in maybe an American movie where like in The Thing, like if we don't solve this here, like it's going to spread across the world and destroy everything. And this is just about like our little neck of the woods, our little tiny corner.
You know what we don't have in these movies? I don't think we don't have a Benedict Arnold.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you look at these movies, everybody, like, they might bicker and they might fight. They might be just really mad at each other. But when push comes to shove, everyone steps up. We don't have anyone who turns around and runs.
Yeah.
And
we have a version of it with Martin Freeman, but granted, we find out he has been taken over.
Yes.
Right.
So you're right.
Mm-hmm.
They still are able to have that archetype, but not cheapen it by actually having someone completely turn tails. That's a great point. Yeah.
I thought that was interesting. And that is something you do get in some of these other movies. You get people who, because that feels like a narrative arc we have to tackle, is somebody's going to be scared. Yeah. Somebody's going to leave their post. Somebody's going to have to be, written out and get a comeuppance for their cowardice. Right.
Yeah. They're going to
in this movie, I feel like everybody who stepped up, they may have gotten a comeuppance for their foolish bravado.
Yeah.
Right? They stepped up and ran into the mouth of the grabber and his head gets choked out. Right?
Yeah.
Like that was interesting.
Yeah. One of the things I read, they were talking about, they as opposed to what we see in Grabbers, whereas like people are getting drunk to survive, but worse. Like everything they do is worse. They said, we decided that rather than that the drunker they were, the better they were at fighting. Like that was the mantra of it. Like the more drunk they got, the more and you see like it starts out it's just like simple sort of throwing around, but by the end bar stools on the hands and punching through. I mean, like they are as drunk as they've ever been in their lives, and yet they're doing Jackie Chan moves.
I was just gonna say they saw the drunken master and didn't realize that he wasn't actually drunk. Like it's a bit,
right?
Well, I'll tell you one big difference between like these folks in these little towns in Ireland and Britain than in the American version. Like in Tremors, and in Tremors, they've got guns. Right. They've got a whole basement full of guns. They're survivalists. So in Attack the Block, a gun is a precious thing, right? They have one or two, and then like, oh, this is going to be a game changer. But then even then, we don't see that being the game changer. Right? When they do get a gun, they have to rely on improvised weapons and kids. Fake samurai katana blades and things like that. Fireworks, right. When an American version, like, just get your rifle. Let's start there at the very least, and then we'll learn why it doesn't work.
When all you have is a hammer.
That's what I was thinking about that, because I know there is a different relationship with arming police in the UK, right? I think standard street police don't have guns.
Correct.
Right? Am I right on that?
Right.
No. Bodies. Garda, but the Garda in Grabbers did have guns, right? They somehow were able to check out a gun or whatever. At some point they were shooting stuff.
They're usually generally how that is worked is it's like it is, you just said it, you check it out. You are not walking around with it. It is something that you are called. It's almost like calling in the SWAT. You call in the gun.
Right.
And then you can go get it because it is extenuating circumstance.
Which is like there's a hot fuzz. That's their whole plot thing.
That's the whole thing.
Right.
Right. So I thought that was I think that's interesting. Another interesting take. I think that's a really good point. Like these movies by necessity, because of setting, have to be brawlers. Have to be more clever with their violence.
Yeah.
Whereas in American horror movies, the protagonist shoots them and then drops the gun. And everyone's like, why would you do that? We don't
want more bullets in that.
They're reusable.
Well, these are stereotypes, right? But the difference between a British director making Alien and an American director making Aliens.
A blowtorch versus, I think they had a space tank. They had the phrase, nuke them from orbit. That wasn't an option for Ridley Scott.
I think they did it very well in terms of like Kynan, when you were talking about all the body swapping invasion kind of things, is that you don't necessarily hate the network. Like you sort of it's a gradual build where by the time you get to the end, you're not exactly with Gary. We're like, like screw the establishment, let's tear it all down. It's sort of like, yeah, well, they make some good points.
Right.
I mean, but then you go, oh, they are doing horrible things. And they never really show you what they do with the bodies. They just sort of allude to it. So you do have that ambiguity at the end where you're sort of like, is this a better plan? Should we go along with it? And I think that's a really strong
world territory of like, what will you be willing to give up for just a normalcy or
for peace, for calm, you know? Like, sure, some of your neighbors might get hollowed out and turned into blue robots, but, some.
Yeah.
But they'll be recycled. Don't worry about it. They're composted.
It's like watching The Matrix and being like, oh, they're going to actually wake them up from their battery.
Yeah. See, I think that was definitely an influence because they're sort of like, as opposed to baby farms and giant robot stuff, too, they're just like, it's the voice of Davy Jones, calmly explaining why this is a better thing. And
I like Pete's version of the Matrix, though. You take the blue pill, everything goes back to glue. Well, I didn't even say what the red pill was. You love noodles that much?
They're really good noodles.
Yeah, really good noodles. Yeah,
that's outstanding.
All right, so there was our British invasion. So and we have final thoughts on the collection of films that we,
as has been the last almost every single, or I think every single episode, other than the ones that I've led, has been thank you for putting these on my list. This one of the greatest joys of this podcast. It's not a requirement, but to show me movies that either I thought were good for me and I didn't want to watch, or had just fallen to the wayside. It's really an absolute pleasure to see these. So these were really smart and they built on themselves really nicely. So this was a great episode. Thank you.
Yep. Great lineup,
for sure. That gives me a great amount of joy to know that you guys enjoyed this and like the three together, and that they worked sort of as a piece. Like it's nice. It's actually like you give somebody a thing, but when you assemble a meal and they say like, that was a well put together meal,
Yeah.
That means a lot.
Right.
But the chicken was wrong.
Exactly.
No, I'm still doing UK stuff.
Recourse.
Yeah.
All right. So
we get a big transition.
Yeah, that's right. So I think I'm handing off the reins to our own Tommy.
That's me. Boy, oh boy. I do not.
Yeah, Tommy, tell us what we're watching next.
I do not have a title. I don't have which movies. I just have the basic idea. Here's what it is. Here's the free title. Here's the temp title is Scream in a Box. The idea is contained horror movies. Horror movies that could, in certain situations, almost be plays. We're either going to go from bigger to smaller or smaller to bigger. All of this has yet to be covered, and they will include some, all, not all. I'm only going to make you watch 3 movies, I promise. Some or none of these, but they may include films like Devil, Knock at the Cabin, Belko Experiment, Quarantine, ID or Identity, Life, Vivarium, Buried, 1408, The Black Phone, Frozen, not the Disney film, the one that takes place on a ski lift, Ghost Ship, Open Water, Misery, Gerald's Game, It Comes at Night, or The Crazies remake starring Timothy Olyphant. I haven't narrowed down. It's going to be made up of those or maybe even some different ones, but it's going to be 3. We're going to talk about what contained horror means to its characters, what it means to the filmmakers, and how we define contained pieces, how that can mean different things, that it doesn't have to be like Devil, for instance, takes place in an elevator. The Crazies takes place in one part of a town, then the bigger town, then a county, but you still feel the containment throughout on purpose because of who the containers are being contained by. What? Anyways, that's my basic idea. Contained movies that take place in one place are one of my most favorite things in the entire world because it puts so much constraint and therefore creativity on the filmmakers. I'm going to give it a try, and I'm going to come up with something, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. It'll be 3 movies at most.
Awesome.
Thank you.
And that is coming up for July. Who knew?
Yeah.
That's our summertime experience.
Right. July 4th, like Americans would want it.
That's the most important.
Yeah.
Do you want to wrap us up? Do you want me to wrap us up, Kyle?
I say, yeah, go ahead, Pete.
I started talking and I shouldn't have.
No,
I just thought I can't.
the spiel better than
podcast. I don't know spiel. Here's the thing. I've already even closed the tab. What do I even know? What do I know?
Pete, this is a disaster.
The usual drill. I will put the Letterboxd link in the show notes so you can catch up on all of the films we talked about today. Make sure you head over and join our Discord server where you can talk about the movies, any of the movies that you would like to talk about in our Sitting in the Dark channel. And if you want to support the show, visit truestory.fm/join. You can jump over there and you'll find actually all of the membership programs on that page. So if there are other shows on the True Story FM network you've never seen, we would love you to check those out too. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you, Kyle, for being our esteemed professor today.
Taking a trip across the pond with me.
So good. On behalf of Tommy Metz III and Kynan Dias and our educator, Kyle Olson, I'm Pete Wright. We'll see you next month right here, Sitting in the Dark.
Good day, Kevna.
You know what I got the other day, Pete? Stephen King's latest. Want to borrow it?
Do you know who you're talking to?
What do you mean?
Andy, when's the last time I read a paper book? It's been decades. I would much rather use Kindle, or better yet, Audible.
What am I thinking? I don't read paper books anymore either. I'm an audiobook guy all the way. For those of you looking to listen to the books behind the films we discussed on the Next Reel's family of podcasts, get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at thenextreel.com/audible.
There are so many great adaptations from these podcasts available in audio form.
Stephen JJ talked about a lot of great ones like Odd Thomas. Isn't that series a favorite of yours?
I love me some Dean Koontz. They also covered The Two Faces of January based on Patricia Highsmith's novel.
I bet the book is far better than that movie. Oof. How about The Futurological Congress by Stanislaw Lem? That was the source for that quirky Robin Wright movie, The Congress.
Crazy book. Definitely worth checking out.
They also covered Lean on Pete, Leave No Trace, Aniara,
Papillon, The Goldfinch, The Yellow Birds, and If Beale Street Could Talk.
So many great adaptations covered in so many great conversations, not just on Trailer Rewind, but all of the Next Reels family of podcasts. And you can get all of these as audiobooks on Audible, along with thousands of other great reads.
Producing these podcasts is a lot of fun, but takes a lot of time.
So, we're directly appealing to you, our dear listener. Please consider an Audible subscription to help support the Next Reels family of podcasts.
I've been using Audible along with my family for decades now. I love it, and I've read hundreds of books through it. Couldn't be more pleased with their service, and I know you'll love it too. Head to thenextreel.com/audible and get your free trial. It really helps us out. And you have a world of over 200,000 audiobooks open to you.
So much great material available. Dive in with a free trial and get your first free audiobook at thenextreel.com/audible.
Start listening to amazing audiobooks of your favorite movie source material with your first free audiobook today. That's thenextreel.com/audible.